Hi class, this is Hazel Razon, your grade 5 science teacher. For today, we will be discussing the reproductive parts of the plants. Flowers are important for sexual reproduction in plants. They produce the male sex cells and the female sex cells. These sex cells must meet to begin the process of reproduction called pollination. Later on, we will be discussing the different kinds or the two main kinds of pollination, the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. Now, for us to fully understand the reproduction in flowering plants, we must first learn the four main types of a typical flower. These are the petals, sepals, stamen, and pistil. We should also learn the two main types of flower, which are the insect pollinated flowers and the wind pollinated flowers. Here is an illustration of a flower and its part. First, the anther. The anther consists of two lobes that contain pollen sacs. Its main function is to hold the pollens that are released by the anther when they mature. Next, we have the filament. The filament is the thin tubular part of the stamen, and it holds the anther in a position tall enough to release the pollen. The stamen is the male part of a flower that consists of the filament and the anther, as you've seen in the illustration. Then we have the stigma. The stigma is a swollen structure at the end of the style. It receives the pollen grains, and the mature stigma secretes a fluid that stimulates the pollen grains. The style. The style is a stalk that connects the stigma to the ovary. It is tall enough to drop the pollen grains. The next part is the ovary. The ovary is the female organ of a flower that consists of the ovules, which develop into seeds upon fertilization. The pistil or the carpels is the female part of a flower, and it consists of the stigma, style, and ovary. They produce the ovule. The petal is the most obvious part of the flower, and the group of petals is called corolla. It gives a bright color that attracts insects for pollination. While sepal are modified leaves, or a group of sepals is called calyx. It protects and supports the bottom of a flower. The receptacle. The receptacle is the axis or stem to which the floral organs are attached. It bears the flowers or the group of flowers. The pedicel is a small stalk bearing the individual flower. Now look at the diagram. In the structure labeled X, what do you call that? Is it pistil, sepal, stamen, or pedicel? If you answered stamen, then you are right. Where is the ovule found in a flower? Is it in the petals, style, nectary, ovary? If you answered ovary, then you are right. Now let us discuss the parts of the flower thoroughly. We have the petals, or the corolla when we say the group of petal. It is often with bright color, pattern, and scent to attract insects and birds. The pistil, which also the female gametes, consists of the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma is the sticky surface that collects pollen, and the style is a neck that joins the stigma to the ovary. The ovary is the part of the ovary that produces ovules, while the stamen are the male gametes. The stamen consists of the anther and the filament. The anther is the head of the stamen that contains the pollen grain, while the filament is a long stalk to support the anther. The sepals or the calyx are the leaves that protect the young flower buds. Pollen can be transported from the anther to the stigma by insects, birds, or other animals, and wind and water. And these are the two main types of flower as to pollination. First, the insect-pollinated flowers. These flowers are adapted to attract insects to them to enable the transfer of pollen. Pollen has barbs for hooking onto insects' fur. They are like barbed wires. Anthers positioned to rub pollens onto insects. The brightly colored petals attracts the insects, and the nectar and a scent present to it. The sticky stigma is present to collect pollens. Like animals and humans, plants also have their way of fertilization. It is when a pollen grain reaches the stigma, a small tube forms and grows down into the ovary. The pollen cells travel down this tube until they reach the ovary. And when a male pollen cell reaches the ovary, it joins with a female ovule to fertilize it. Fertilization happens when the male gamete fuses with the ovule or the female gamete. Now let's try this one. Label the reproductive part of the flower. I will give you 10 minutes to illustrate and label the parts of this flower. Let's check how much you've learned. First question, what is the male reproductive part of the flower? Number 2, it protects and supports the bottom of the flower. Number 3, the process of plants reproduction which the pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma. Number 4, what is the most and attractive part of the flower? And number 5, what is the female reproductive part of a flower? For the last time, draw and compare the kinds of pollination below. The self and the cross-pollination. That's all for now. This is your teacher Hazel saying, have a nice day.